everyone. Don't touch that dial. Stay tuned. Other TV things. Because today, on Fully Endorsed, we are the last people on the entire internet to talk about WandaVision. And with me, as always, is the Kaiju Noir. I mean, that's the channel.
Hello, people of the internet. Hi, this is Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir. Have you ever felt not so fresh?
Is your man tired of you burning his toast? That's like my favorite line in the first episode. Oh, it's great. It's so make me a sandwich. I love it.
So yeah, we finally decided to. Well, I finally decided to, catch up on the WandaVision bandwagon as soon as everyone else has moved on from WandaVision and onto Falcon and Winter Soldier. But Dylan here. And
you best believe that after Falcon and the Winter Soldier is over, we're gonna be covering that on this show too. Because I'm a fucking crack addict. You understand? Every week I'm just like, yo, Disney, you got that Marvel, like I'm scratching and shit. Like,
well, yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's been like an entire year without anything from Marvel, and the part of me was very curious as to whether or not people will be over Marvel with having gone a full year without any other superhero properties from them. But
in a weird way, and I feel kind of the same way about Godzilla versus Kong, which we'll talk about in another video. Eyebrows. I feel like COVID has actually done some of these properties a little bit of a favor in that it's just what we need now. Stepping back into the Marvel universe after the year.
We need WandaVision. The world needs it.
I mean, yeah, like after 2020, stepping back into the Marvel universe just felt like a warm blanket, It's just like, oh yeah, there we are, that's good. Yeah.
Good old-fashioned escapism.
We're coming up on like a year anniversary of like when we were supposed to see Black Widow. Like, it's been a rough time.
You could say that.
And this is like the most packed year ever for Marvel because you've got all these shows coming out. In the later half of the year, we've got 4 movies coming out.
Jesus Christ.
It's fucking stacked. All because last year sucked.
Major balls.
We're on the record now of saying that 2020 sucked. We might be the last people on the internet to make that point as well.
Why would you say something so what was that Eric Andre quote? Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So this is our review of Too Many Cooks, WandaVision, and it really is just Too Many Cooks, the series, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I don't know where to begin. Andres,
yes.
Give us a brief background into your experience with the MCU up to this point. I guess that's the most relevant thing.
Okay, I guess so. So, yeah, I was there from the very beginning. I remember way back in 2008, I was I was a sophomore. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was a sophomore in high school, or maybe I was still a freshman. No, yeah, sophomore or junior, I think. I was in the middle of high school, and I saw Iron Man on the big screen with my friends, and we left. We didn't see that original like the post credit scene to start the trend of post credit scenes. We didn't do that. There was, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, there was a time when people did not stay through the entire movie.
And post credit scenes used to be incredibly rare.
Yeah.
Usually you wouldn't even know about them until like you had it on home video and like you had heard, hey, did you know there was a post-credit scene? Like they were super rare.
Yeah, like the only thing off the top of my head would be like from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's like, what are you doing? The movie's over. Go home.
Yeah. The first post-credit scene I ever saw was in the 1980s canon movie adaptation of He-Man, where after the credits, Frank Langella popped back up as Skeletor and was like, I'll be back. Spoiler, he wasn't.
Yeah. So ever since then, I've been watching every single MCU movie up to the present day, and so I managed to watch everything. Some movies I saw in theaters when they came out, some movies like Thor and Captain Marvel are movies that I didn't see until like way after the fact, especially when I moved to Japan, and it became a little bit more difficult to go out to see movies at that point. But yeah, I kept up with it for a good long while, and I really loved the hell out of Endgame. I thought it was like a proper place to end the series, but I did thought that it was definitely a very interesting. It left the door open for more potential interesting stories down the road. But it was
the closing of one book,
yes,
and the prologue of another.
Yes, yeah, especially with Spider-Man: Far From Home. So at that point, I was kind of getting tired of Marvel. I guess like superhero movies, like a lot of people have felt that sort of like Marvel fatigue. It kind of happens to a lot of trends. They come and go, whether it be film noirs, westerns, or like action machismo like Stallone, Schwarzenegger blockbuster action movies. Movies come like the musicals at one point. Trends come and go. You know, when something is popular, everyone joins in on the bandwagon until there's an oversaturation, and eventually it comes to pass. I feel like we were for a while reaching that oversaturation point, but I guess like the coronavirus helped give a lot of people that break from superhero movies. And seeing the popularity of WandaVision and Captain Falcon and Winter... I almost said Captain Falcon.
Captain Falcon. You're not the only person on the internet who keeps making that mistake. I've heard other people say it.
I was thinking of Captain America and Falcon.
Yeah, and you wound up with the Super Smash Brothers character, Captain Falcon.
Yes!
I don't actually know what he's from other than Super Smash Brothers. I'm not well versed in Nintendo.
He's from a sci-fi racing game franchise called F-Zero.
Oh, a race? Interesting. So why does he have a punch? Never mind.
Well, you ever played Smash Brothers? You never saw his racing stages where there's like a race going on and the characters are fighting in the middle of the race, getting hit by passing by ships.
I have not played a Smash Brothers game since the 64, and I don't remember if there was.
Shit.
I do not remember if there was such a stage in Smash Brothers 64.
No, there wasn't. Unfortunately, that wasn't until Melee on the GameCube. Anyways, one of these days, if we ever meet in person, I'm bringing my Switch and we're gonna play Smash Ultimate.
All right then.
Funny enough.
Remember, other than my first console being a Nintendo 64, beyond that, I've been a Sony boy the whole time.
Yes.
So,
so anyways, I was definitely very intrigued with WandaVision. Unfortunately, I couldn't see it because I didn't have access to Disney Plus in Japan. Now, they do offer Disney Plus in Japan. However, it's not like Netflix where I can log into my American Netflix account and just get access to Japanese Netflix here with the same, password and information. So I cannot log in because the login style for Japan's Disney Plus is so different from American Disney Plus. So what happens here is, if you want to get Disney Plus in Japan, you need to make a Japanese Disney account. In order to make a Japanese Disney account, you got to sign up with this cell phone credit card company called Docomo, and Docomo is in charge with all the Disney account shenanigans. So it's like I got to jump through a lot of these ridiculous hoops. I got to make an account for this and then set up an account for that, and it's all in Japanese. So it's I'm totally fucked there. So yeah, it's just complete BS. It's not like just make an account, put in your debit card, credit card information. No, it's nothing. It's not that simple, like Netflix or whatever. So yeah, I had zero access to Disney Plus in Japan.
It sounds just awful.
Yeah. So in any case, I could definitely I should invest at some point in NordVPN or whatever. That way I can get access to American Disney Plus. But for the time being,
all the good shit is you gotta get on that.
Right. Unfortunately for me, it's to this day I've lived in Japan without a debit/credit card. Because that's another bullshit thing. In America, you simply get your credit card or debit card from your bank account. that doesn't happen in Japan. In Japan, you got to go to your cell phone service provider, like Docomo or whatever, and then from them you get a credit card, debit card that then you have to connect to your bank account. Everything's so fucking overly I think they try to make it more convenient by putting your cell phone company and bank company and online service company and try to cram it all into one convenient thing, but it just makes everything more complicated for me. So fuck credit cards, fuck VPNs. That's
Jesus. And they say that America is too bureaucratic.
Have you seen Shin Godzilla?
Now that you've blown off some steam about your time in Japan.
Okay, so yeah, eventually I finally had access to WandaVision thanks to my good friend Dillion here, who we were able to watch through the magic of StreamYard, which is what we're currently using to record this very podcast.
Yes, totally legally. I'm legally using Disney Plus, so like, it's a legal loophole, all right? Anyway.
God bless screen and audio sharing.
Yes, and God bless StreamYard, although I'm tired of those fucking... Is anybody else getting these terrible fucking StreamYard ads on YouTube? I hate it. I have the ad block on the laptop, but a lot of the times I'm watching it on my phone, and it's the most annoying thing in the world. Anyway.
I tell you, man, they're watching us. They know what we're doing, every single move, what we're doing online.
Now that we've both blown off some steam. So yeah, my experience with the MCU is very similar to yours. I haven't had the whole...
burnout?
Fatigue issue with the MCU. No. But I certainly understand it. Like you, Phase 1 pretty much came out throughout my high school career. You were you're a tad bit older than me, so you were like halfway through high school when Iron Man came out. For me, it was like Iron Man came out when I was a freshman, and the Avengers came out the summer after I graduated. Like, it was... Phase 1 was my high school career, and I was, I wasn't really going to the movies very often back then. Mm-hmm. So I did not see a single one of the Phase 1 movies in the theater.
Oh.
I saw them all later when they came to home video. Now, Phase 2, I saw like half of them in the theater. Phase 3, I've seen them all on the big screen, and I'm never going back. And yeah, I mean, that shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. I mean, if you're alive, if you've been alive during this period, then you've been watching the MCU pretty much, whether you love it or hate it. And now we have WandaVision. So very basic, very broad, general thoughts. WandaVision, go.
I thought it was just the thing to shake things up and make the MCU a bit more interesting, and while also providing a much needed fleshing out for two characters that were enjoyable in the Avengers movies but never had quite the time to shine. And this was definitely the perfect outlet to give these two characters, Wanda and Vision, some much needed exposure.
Yeah, they've been doing a great job of that so far with these Disney Plus shows. Again, you haven't seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier yet, but they've really done a lot to sort of flesh out both of their characters. Mm-hmm. And we're only 2 episodes in at this point. Mm-hmm. And then in WandaVision, we barely got to see their relationship in the movies. Most of it happened off screen.
Right.
In this show, they developed it and made them like probably the best MCU couple.
Yeah, probably, because it's not like a lot of constant bickering like you would see with Tony Stark and what was her name, Pepper Potts.
Yeah. I'm a Cap and Peggy guy, but they were separated for 70 plus years.
There's a weird thing going on with him and what was it, Peggy's niece, I think, in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, listen. He didn't know she was his niece. She didn't know that he was her maybe uncle, or is that a different timeline? I don't know. It is kind of weird. But, so yeah, they really did flesh those two out.
Uh-huh.
And like you said, they really did shake up the formula in this show. I know that there are some people who complain about, well, in the last episode it just turns into a Marvel movie, and I'm like, well, what did you fucking expect, man?
that's the biggest thing. Like, everyone was really into because like the first 3 episodes is very much so like one gigantic homage to shows like Bewitched or I Love Lucy or was it the Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch. Dick Van Dyke was a big one.
Dick Van Dyke, yeah. So like they make a lot of like loving homages, loving very well produced homages to these older shows from across the decades. And so a lot of people were, I can see it, like myself included, where a lot of people were really into this sort of deal. It's kind of like what's old is new again. Yeah. So
this probably would have been a more interesting question for me to ask at the beginning of the episode rather than what your experience is with the MCU, because duh.
It's like my very first theatrical review on this YouTube channel was me and a couple of family friends reviewing Avengers.
I did not know that. Fun fact. All right.
Don't watch it. A lot of those early theatrical movie reviews are not that good. That was before I met I brought my buddy Pete on, my high school friend Pete on to do those reviews.
Right. We all hate our old videos. It's fine. But a more interesting question would be, how are you on old sitcoms?
So a lot of my love for sitcoms mainly came into being during middle school and high school, where I started getting into Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Friends, Roseanne, The Cosby Show. A lot of it is more focused on like 80s and 90s era sitcoms. I didn't really get into too many sitcoms in the 2000s and almost none, I want to say, in the 2010s. In terms of old school sitcoms, I never had this. Most of my exposure actually came from Nick at Night. So any of the shows that came on during Nick at Night, which was the late night block, when they stopped airing like SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents and instead showed reruns of like older sitcoms, I mainly saw the stuff that came out like around like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Usually like the much older stuff would come out around like 10 or 11 p.m. and that's at that point I'm already went to bed. So like a lot of my exposure to like older sitcoms mainly came from my history of television course that I took in college, where we went through, as the name implies, the history of television, and we ended up seeing stuff like I Love Lucy and Mary Tyler Moore and a lot of that other stuff. And a lot of another course that I took was the history of women in television, and that was another similar thing of looking at the portrayal of women, female characters throughout television history. So a lot of my knowledge of these films came from a basic understanding that I've learned about through my film courses, and that it's allowed me to have like a much greater appreciation for these TV shows. If anything, most of the older shows that I watch are usually tokusatsu based, be it Ultraman or Kamen Rider, Sentai, what have you.
Right. See, I don't get to talk about it much on YouTube because it's just not the sort of thing that we usually cover. But I freaking love old sitcoms. We grew up at really the perfect time to get into old sitcoms, you and me, because like you mentioned, there was Nick at Night.
Yes.
There was also TV Land.
Yeah, TV Land. Yeah. I think that's how like my grandmother and I ended up watching like a little bit bits and pieces of like what was it? I forgot. What's the lawyer show that Raymond Burr was on?
Perry Mason.
Perry Mason, yes. I feel so ashamed because the Perry Mason theme used to be my original theme song on this channel back in 2012. And we also ended up watching The Golden Girls through TV Land, I believe, as well.
Yeah, like, so growing up, I just, like, that's what I, during the day, if there was no cartoon on that I wanted to watch, I would watch a bunch of old sitcoms. I've seen so much. I just grew up on, like, old, like, fucking Gilligan's Island and Bewitched and friggin', Three's Company I love.
Yeah. I Dream of Jeannie?
I Dream of Jeannie. You mentioned I Love Lucy before.
Yeah.
I've seen every episode.
Happy Days?
I didn't watch a ton of Happy Days.
Okay.
That was one that I never really got into that much. I mean, The Fonz is cool.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Golden Girls. That's probably my favorite. I mean, a ton of old sitcoms, old shows, All in the Family, this and that. I've seen so much sitcom material over my life.
Another big one, Full House.
Full House, yes, very popular. Watched it a lot when I was younger. Can't stomach it now.
Oh, how can I forget? How can I forget the greatest '90s sitcom, Horsing Around?
Horsing Around, of course, the classic. Also, growing up, was it Disney? One of those channels used to air a lot of Boy Meets World.
Oh yeah, I didn't watch a lot of that, but I did end up watching. Would you say does Lizzie McGuire count as a sitcom? Because
I think all of those Disney Channel shows do count as sitcoms.
Yeah, Even Stevens.
Lizzie McGuire, Even Stevens, yeah. Cory in the House, the greatest anime of all time.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. No doubt. What was it? The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody.
Sweet Life of Zack and Cody before they went on the fucking boat. Fuck the boat.
Some things never change, Dylan.
That's So Raven.
Yeah, oh god, yes, That's So Raven. Do you remember from
I mentioned Cory in the House and forgot the original.
Do you remember yeah, I know, right? Do you remember from Nickelodeon, The Brothers Garcia? Or I guess no, okay.
I don't remember that at all.
Okay, I guess that was more. I'm not sure if it's a sitcom or more like a comedy drama sort of deal on Nickelodeon, but Nickelodeon had some stuff as well.
You remember Phil of the Future? I
remember Phil of the Future. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of shit like that, and then of course in the 2000s, of course, it was the decade of The Office, which was obviously a big deal. Love me some of The Office. So yeah, I'm a sitcom head and an MCU fanatic, and so this show was practically made for me.
Yeah.
I've never related to a character more than when we found out that Wanda's whole life was just her watching sitcoms.
Right. And that's it's kind of interesting because like her accent just keeps disappearing between, keeps coming and going in throughout the movies. And to the point,
and they do address that in the show and kind of make a gag out of it, which is fun.
Yeah, and I guess it's like her reason for knowing so much English, and especially the accent, is just her growing up on sitcoms with her family on DVD.
Which you really didn't even need the DVD thing, because I mean a lot of old shows get like aired in like foreign countries years later. Like,
right.
So I don't even know why they needed the whole DVD salesman angle to explain that, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure where their family even got DVDs over in Russian Slavia, Spagoni, Sarkovia, yes.
She's so Covian.
But yeah, it was a very interesting in-universe explanation as to why she suddenly wants to warp the world around her. Speaking of which, so apparently this is like the adaptation of two storylines, one classic, the other very recent, and that sort of like combines the two into this sort of mishmash that is WandaVision.
It's kind of three, honestly, because there are House of M vibes.
Yes.
There's also the recent Vision comic where he moved into the suburbs and had like an android family.
Yeah.
Sparky the dog was originally from that comic. And then there's also the classic Wanda and Vision storyline from back in the day where they got married and had the kids and Vision got disassembled and this and that.
And then White Vision, yeah. Okay, then.
White Vision.
I wasn't aware of the last two, but I definitely was aware of House of M, mainly because of Spider-Man. During the high school when I used to research like old Spider-Man, the history of Spider-Man, apparently there was I knew that during House of M, where Wanda sort of warped the world in which like mutants were in charge and not humans, Spider-Man was able to pretend he was a mutant thanks to his spider powers until he eventually was outed as a human and was eventually on the run with Aunt May and Mary Jane, I believe. I could be wrong there.
It's been a long time since I've looked at any of that stuff.
Yeah, but they managed to take much like what I appreciate a lot about the MCU is that they managed to take the core component, the key components of these various storylines and adapt them in a way that's like familiar and new at the same time. So it creates like a very interesting product for everyone to enjoy, for mainstream audiences and perhaps hardcore comic fans to enjoy. So
have a very clever way of taking these sort of disparate comic storylines and like melding them and merging them and adapting them in a way that makes sense for the universe that they've built.
yeah,
It's very similar to what, DC was doing on television when we were kids with the Justice League shows.
right, yeah, like the DCAU, the DC animated universe, definitely took on. It started as like just a condensed version, basic version of the DC comics until it eventually developed an identity of its own, to where it started creating its own unique concepts like the Zeta Project, Static Shock, and Batman Beyond. Although I know Static Shock came from
It did come from
comics.
a comic,
Yeah.
Their version of him is a bit different. But yeah,
Right, but and they created like these things, and now whenever we think of the universe, we think of those concepts, to the point where even the comics try to take key aspects from the DC animated universe, whether it's Terry McGinnis or Static Shock or Harley Quinn, stuff like that.
I want both of those guys to have a movie. Damn it, DC, make a Batman Beyond movie, you cowards, and make a Static Shock movie.
Yeah,
just do it.
We've had enough of Bruce Wayne. Damn it.
Just fucking do it.
Do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Don't you want those? Hey, look, everybody, we got a black superhero. Don't you want that money? Do a Static Shock movie. And he's a teenage relatable superhero. He's like your own Black Spider-Man. You have your own Miles Morales, who has Magneto and Shocker powers or Electro powers, and you're not using him. And he has sick ass dreads and rides around on a disc. Anyway.
So yeah, it's a great following the MCU and seeing it initially being just like their take on like Golden Age, Silver Age. No, not Golden Age, actually Bronze Age. Yeah, Bronze Age 60s Marvel, and then eventually taking an identity of its own, and now the status quo that we have before us is a status quo with limitless possibilities, and it's a universe that's so now like very divorced from the comics. At this point, a lot of the major heroes, spoiler alert, have been retired, and so now we're left with the characters that are still around, and what better characters to start off with than two characters that really didn't get to do much. And
and I love that so far in the MCU post Endgame, we've really been diving into the fallout of Endgame, the fallout of the blip, and the effects that it has. In Spider-Man: Homecoming, it was more about like how the blip affects like social relationships, like, oh, there was a kid 5 years below you who's now in the same class, stuff like that. In this, it's more about like how the events of Infinity War and Endgame like traumatized people, and we get to see Wanda going through this grieving process. I mean, this show is basically her going through the stages of grief, just with superpowers,
right?
And then not to spoil anything for Falcon and Winter Soldier, but that show is focusing a lot more on not focusing on, but they've gone a bit more into how the blip affected like society. So we're getting like the fallout of what happened before, which is great. Consequences, that's always a good thing in a movie.
Oh yeah, something to throw some light shade, something you never see in the Monsterverse.
They'll rebuild the city. It'll be
San
Francisco, it's better now.
Yeah, nuclear fallout? Nah, that's a myth.
Listen, all right, the entire kaiju genre is built on the back of radiation doing things that it doesn't do in real life. I'm willing to give them a pass on that one.
It's funny, given how the entire conceit of behind Godzilla's creation is the consequences of nuclear weaponry.
Right.
Anyway, and so we get two parallel stories going on here, where we have not just Wanda, who is going through her grieving period, the loss of Vision, trying to recreate Vision from her own memories and trying to develop a new take on a possible alternate dimension, like future, where she and Vision lived happily ever after as a couple, living in the suburban area. What's it called? Suburban town of Westfield and Westview. Thank you, Westview, and starting a family and hiding their superpowers except from their closest friends. At the
By the
same,
way, Westview before Wanda came, as we saw in episode 8, kind of a shitty town. She kind of did them a favor in a lot of ways. It was really run down, and like maybe it didn't look like that when her and Vision originally bought the house or the plot, because we did see an Endgame that sort of everywhere got kind of ran down over the 5 years.
Yeah.
So maybe it was like a really nice neighborhood prior to Infinity War.
At the same time, we are reintroduced to a very minor character from Captain Marvel, the Captain Marvel movie, yes. Monica Rambeau, who is the daughter of I forgot her name, but she's essentially
Maria Rambeau.
Thank you, Maria Rambeau. If you don't know her, or if you've never seen Captain Marvel, she is essentially Captain Marvel's best friend from her military pilot days.
And you skipped Captain Marvel because you heard it was awful. It's not that bad. It's just a Phase 1 movie that came out in Phase 3. That's the best way to describe it.
I guess so, yeah. Well, what was it? So, like, now we are introduced to a present-day version of Monica Rambeau. Now it's been, like, a good 30 years after the events of Captain Marvel, because it took place in the 90s.
Yeah, 90... Ooh, I don't remember the exact year. But yeah, so it would be... I mean, well, we're from the 90s, and we're not quite 30 yet, so it's...
No. I'm almost 1 year away from 30.
Jesus.
But, we're getting old, man. I got the heartburn and everything. My bones are breaking. My legs ain't what they used to be. My vision's going out.
It's been roughly
I'm coming, Elizabeth.
Oh wait, but this takes place in 2023, so yeah, probably closer to 30 years.
Yes. So
I always forget about the time skip.
Yeah. We skip a good chunk of years. So they got a couple years before they eventually we catch up to them in real life.
Right. This world is already like firmly in alternate future point, like alternate history territory, given everything that's happened. So it doesn't even really matter.
Right. So
it's not gonna be like a Back to the Future situation where we're like, "Where's Jaws? Fucking 30 or whatever."
Where are they gonna make the Jaws? Where are they gonna make the shark not look fake?
Where are my self-lacing shoes, Nike? And then Nike was like, "Oh, we are actually working on that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool."
But they're only in limited supplies because they are really ridiculously expensive for people. Too expensive for the common consumer to buy.
Yeah, you remember that self-drying jacket?
Yeah.
Can you imagine how expensive that would be?
Oh God, yeah. It's like the only place I can see that being
they
beneficial.
Already charge way too much money for fucking clothes. So you're gonna put an air conditioner in it? Like fucking.
Like we're gonna use that in Seattle where it rains all the time? Just get an umbrella.
A self-drying umbrella. Oh.
Oh shit! There was an invention. I'll show it to you later. There was like an umbrella that uses air instead of like an actual plastic sheet, so it just like blows the air outwards.
The most ridiculous thing about that future to me is the fucking clear plastic tie that Doc Brown wears, and I'm like, what's the point? It's not helping anything.
It's like chain, maybe it's like that, chains that used to hang from your pants. What's the point of those? Nothing.
Are you talking about? No, there was a point for those. Aren't those? Those are wallet chains, aren't they?
Were they?
It's like it attaches to your wallet.
Oh yeah, they were, but no one ever used them like that. I think. I don't know.
Well, no, but some people did. The point is, people might have just had chains from their jeans as a fashion statement, but there is a utility to that.
Oh boy. So, anyways, back to Monica Rambeau. She was one of the people who was in the real world, we refer to the whole Thanos, wiping out half the universe. We refer to it as the snap. If you didn't see Spider-Man Far From Home, it was called the blip. And yes. So
the blip is the official designation at this point.
Right, because nobody knows that it was a snap that did it all.
Well, yeah, snap refers to just the act of Thanos snapping. The blip is a term that references the entire event from Thanos snapping to Hulk snapping everybody back. It's the entire 5 years is known as the blip. So,
because that's what it felt like for anybody there. It's like they felt like they just went to sleep and then woke up, just like in like a matter of seconds. Just a blip on their radar. 5 years just went by before their very eyes.
Right, they blipped. Okay, yeah. So it's really two separate terms. The snapping is still a thing, but it is only the beginning of
the blippening.
The blippening.
So we have Air Force pilot Monica Rambeau, well, not Air Force pilot. She was a a member of Sword, which is like a new, essentially the replacement for Shield, since Shield was sort of disbanded as a result of Winter Soldier.
In the comics,
yes.
Sword is like Shield's sister agency that deals more with like space and like space threats. And it seems like that was also the case in the MCU, but in the absence of Shield and with everything that's gone on during the blip, Sword has become more sort of multi-purpose, and they're doing more than just space stuff.
Right. So with Monica, she
found out that Maria Rambeau founded Sword, probably with some help from Nick Fury, I would imagine.
Right. So with Monica, she was one of the people who was involved in the blip, and she went through was perhaps one of the most horrifying, like, existential nightmares you can imagine for someone just coming back from the blip. Where she was visiting her mother, her mother who was I'm not sure if they said she was dying maybe of something like cancer or something, but
it was cancer. Yeah.
Okay, so she was dying of cancer, and she was laying next to her mother in a seat next to her mother's bed, and she went to sleep. She didn't even see herself get snapped out of existence. She was asleep next to her mother when the snap happened, and so she eventually comes back to life, and she wakes up. Her mother isn't there. She realizes her mother has been dead for the last 3 years, and she's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's like, it's one thing to see it's one existential nightmare to see yourself being slowly phased out of existence. It's another one to have not been aware that you were phased out of existence, only to come back and realize this entire shit took place. And
I mean, it's really sort of a miniature version of what Cap went through.
Yeah.
Cap, as far as he knew, was dead. And then one day he wakes up in the year 2011 or whatever, and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. That was essentially what happened with Monica, and so she eventually joins up with two other characters from prior Marvel movies, Jimmy Woo from the Ant-Man movies, and Darcy Lewis from the Thor movies.
Yes.
Forming this sort of like ragtag group of side characters to investigate what's been going on with Wanda, the pseudo fake Vision, and what's happening to what was it called, Westview.
And they're a great trio. I love all the stuff with Monica and Wu, Jimmy, and Darcy, who was like kind of annoying in the Thor movies, but I thought they did her a lot better here.
Oh, most definitely, yeah. And I would say that they definitely have picked, like, it's very interesting to see characters that you weren't really all that impressed with before suddenly being given a team of like much more competent writers to make them more interesting characters. In the case of Jimmy Woo,
I know a lot of people felt that way about Jimmy Woo in Ant-Man and the Wasp. I personally liked Jimmy Woo in Ant-Man and the Wasp because I just think that actor is is just very charming, and he does a good job.
Yeah, that's true. I would say like he just never had like that big of a chance to shine. He was just nothing more than just like an obstacle for Ant-Man to bypass in order to do what he needs to do.
He does have like my favorite line from that movie, and really the most memorable line, when he's talking to Paul Rudd's daughter, and he's like, "Your daddy went to Germany and drew on the walls with Captain America."
So yeah, it was interesting, like seeing this TV series. It for the most part it stands alone. Like all you need to know is you need to have watched the last two Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame, really, to know what Wanda's story is all about.
Sure, but in order to watch those movies, you have to have seen everything else. So.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like every other reference, whether it's Monica Rambeau or Jimmy Woo or Darcy Lewis, you don't really need to watch all those movies. You don't need to watch Captain Marvel, Ant-Man, nor the Thor movies to get where they're coming from. The show does a good enough job reintroducing these characters in this show.
I would argue that even though this is still late in the continuity and it is connected to so many other things, it's not a terrible starting place for the MCU because all the stuff you really need to know about Wanda and her backstory gets explained to you.
Right. She and unfortunately, because her and her brother Quicksilver, they were never really developed all that well, I'd argue, in Age of Ultron. They were just sort of like lackeys for Ultron and no, for Hydra and later Ultron, only to switch sides at the last minute when they realized.
And then she got better stuff to do in Civil War and then later Infinity War, but he was dead.
Right. They didn't give they pretty much like Quicksilver got the short end of the stick right there, and that sucks given how he's a pretty important X-Men character. But this ain't an X-Men universe, so fuck you.
They did kind of waste their Quicksilver, which was a major boner on their part.
I see what you did there.
We'll address that later.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Ooh-wee.
Now's not the time for fear. That comes later. So
the sitcom stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They fucking nailed every era of sitcom. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Week after week. They just, as somebody who has seen multiple shows from every one of these decades, you freaking nail it.
Yeah,
seriously. The first episode is, I mean, they're all a little bit bewitched because of her powers.
Yeah.
But the first episode is so Dick Van Dyke and I Love Lucy, and the second episode is leans more into like the Bewitched and like I Dream of Jeannie stuff, and the third episode is very Brady Bunch, very Partridge Family, 80s, just all Family Ties, Full House, Growing Pains. They skipped the 90s, and my theory as to why I mentioned this to you is that most of the really popular sitcoms from the 90s aren't family sitcoms. It's stuff like Seinfeld and like Frasier and like Friends. So I think maybe that's why.
I mean, didn't like the Full House kind of also seeped into the 90s for a good chunk of its run?
Very early 90s, though. Like, the part of the 90s that might as well still be the 80s. You know what I mean?
And I guess there's like Fresh Prince, which it does revolve around a family, you know, the Bankses, but it's like...
Right, but it's a very different kind of family.
Right. I guess Roseanne is also another one where it's like Full House started in the 80s, seeped into the 90s, but a lot of the 90s felt like just carryovers from the 80s. If not just moving away from the family sitcom format as a whole, or just completely revamping it like Fresh Prince did in a way that you couldn't really do with the format that they set up with Wanda and her fictional family.
I feel like in the 90s we were just kind of tired of family sitcoms at that point, and we were just exploring other premises.
Right.
Because the 80s was so fucking sappy.
I mean, it was the 80s that led to the birth of The Simpsons, which was initially made to satirize the shit out of the ultra sappiness by subverting expectations and creating this very, ironically, more realistic portrayal of a dysfunctional family, as opposed to like the squeaky clean version we used to see.
They weren't the only ones either. I mean, you mentioned Roseanne. There was also Married with Children.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of that going on. But then they skip the 90s, and then we go into the 2000s with like some Malcolm in the Middle vibes. That episode also reminded me a lot of those sort of classic 2000s like Disney Channel shows like Even Steven.
Yeah. In fact, like, if there's one critique I would make is that I wish they gave the whole series a more vintage feeling to it all. Like, they did their best when it came to like the 50s, 60s, 70s, portrayals of those eras of television. They even went so far as to provide like more low budget effects, like traditional. Yes,
that's actually a great story. The special effects guy for this show was he's an older gentleman, and he was trained by the dudes who used to do the effects for like Bewitched and like I Dream of Jeannie and those old shows. And so he knew how to do all those classic effects, you know, the moving stuff on wires and the classic jump cut that you do when you want to make something magically appear.
Yeah.
A trick that we pulled off once with me.
With your magic.
Conjuring a soda can. And if you'll remember, Andres, that was my idea. So even back then, my sitcom fandom was coming into play.
What better way to have a grand face reveal than to do something like that?
Listen, when Wanda's powers were on the fritz in that 7th episode, I felt that, you know. I was like, I've been there, girl. No, he knew how to pull all that stuff off.
Mhm.
They the making of this show is very interesting. I would encourage anybody who's interested. There is a making of documentary on Disney Plus.
Nice.
Under I think it's Legends, one of those Marvel banners that they've got a making of documentary for this, and it's really fascinating. They actually did film the first episode in front of a live studio audience. That is real laughter.
Mhm.
They had a lunch with Dick Van Dyke, and they like picked his brain and like learned exactly how they used to film those old episodes.
Yeah.
And did it the Dick Van Dyke way.
Yeah.
And the director of this show, I think his name is Matt Shackman. He growing up was a child actor, and he actually featured in a bunch of 80s sitcoms such as Growing Pains and Family Ties and stuff like that. So he grew up on sitcom sets. Elizabeth Olsen, you know, her sisters, of course, were the Olsen twins who were in Full House. She also grew up on sitcom sets watching her sisters.
I mentioned this when we were watching WandaVision. How surreal it must be to suddenly be like reliving a version, like to see your sisters become major like Hollywood stars, only to then like a decade or two later become bigger than them, and to then start copying the very thing that made your sisters famous to begin with.
Right. And then they brought in Deborah Jo Rupp, who of course was Kitty on That 70s Show. And so a lot of the credit for them nailing the sitcom stuff, Kevin Feige also is a big sitcom guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he watched a lot of Nick at Night back in the day, just like the rest of us. So that has a lot to do with it. So a lot of their success at nailing these old sitcoms comes from the fact that they brought in people who have real sitcom chops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely very true, and I commend them on the incredible amount of effort it took for them to recreate that feeling. My one little nitpick would be that I wish they got like vintage style cameras, because despite all their work, everything is made to look very squeaky clean, pristine HD 4K quality. And so
in the case of the 50s and 60s, it's more understandable because I don't even think those cameras still exist.
Right.
And if they do, they're not in working order.
And I suppose they would. I suppose it would have beaten them putting an obviously fake digital filter over everything to make it seem vintage. I guess probably they thought it would have been too distracting. At the very least, they got the aspect ratio right.
Yes, I love the way they play with aspect ratios in this show, and it has a purpose. Unlike whatever the fuck they were doing with Zack Snyder. Why was that movie in 4:3?
It was filmed for IMAX, damn it!
To preserve Zack Snyder's original vision. Why did he want it to be in 4:3? Anyway,
because that's how IMAX screens work.
Why? Why don't they just make them wider?
I don't know.
Why'd you... Whatever. Because then if you... Whatever.
Yeah.
Because then if it had been released in theaters and he shot it for IMAX, they would have either had to have had it been 4:3 in the theater, or they would have more likely had to like crop it down. Wouldn't it be easier and make more sense to just post convert to IMAX? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not that big into the technical side of filmmaking, more so just the writing side, I suppose.
Anyways.
Yes.
So, what was it? Okay, by the time we got to the 80s, they all start to kind of look this... Like, the odd thing is, looking at the 80s with them trying to do the parody of the whole Full House, 80s family sitcom sort of deal, schmaltzy sitcom sort of deal, it didn't really look like 80s to me. It looked more like a modern-day Disney sitcom, TV sitcom.
They did nail the costuming.
Yes, that's definitely very true there. But I suppose like maybe that's the fault of Disney sitcoms, ironically this being a Disney product as well. Kind of...
This is a Disney sitcom, huh?
Yeah. Disney sort of kind of like took things in a very retro direction by like we were we were mentioning how when it came to like the 60s episode, we noticed that there were more outdoor environments.
Yes, which is very accurate because that's when that started to happen in sitcoms. In Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, in those shows, we saw them sort of going out into different locations much more often, which was not possible in the 50s,
right,
when everything was done on static sets. Everything had to be, either pre-built or like they had to throw it together real fast for that particular episode.
Right, and I feel like maybe at some point there was like a regression in TV sitcoms for Disney to where everything started to look very restrictive during that like That's So Raven, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody sort of era.
Yeah, that's more of a budget thing, I think.
Right.
I gotta tell you, this is how ignorant I was as a child of how like filming things works. I used to always watch the intro for That's So Raven.
Yeah. And
it would be an episode that I knew was earlier, but they would have clips in the intro from like later episodes, and I would always be like, how did they know? She really is psychic. Like I didn't understand. I didn't understand that they most likely filmed them all in like a batch.
Right, like they do with any season.
Right. This is like I'm like 8, so like whatever,
Oh man. So but anyways, yeah, they definitely captured the look and feel of all these eras. And I wish they didn't really spell it out to you by having her hold the actual DVDs of what shows they were specifically referencing. Like, I didn't need her to have a DVD of Malcolm in the Middle to know that they were doing Malcolm in the Middle or what was it called, Modern Family? I think I only ever saw like one episode of Modern Family. That was specifically for my history of films television class.
It's that episode is kind of a mix. It's mostly Modern Family, but there's also some Office vibes. I mean, Modern Family basically is The Office, just not in an office. You know what I mean? Like, It's the same kind of show.
Not an office. House. Wait, no, that's another show.
That's an entirely different matter.
And yeah, for the first 3 episodes, they, for the most part, stuck close to this sitcoms format, and occasionally dropping a major unsubtle hint that something is amiss here, and not all is what it seems to be.
And it becomes more frequent. In the first episode, there's like one weird scene. In the second episode, there's a few. By the time you get to the third episode, shit's just crazy. And because in the third episode, that's the one where she's pregnant too, and her powers are on the fritz, and like everything is just wild.
And everything's starting to like this is a thing that starts to happen more and more frequently, where it's like because she's unable to control her powers, things starts reverting and changing. A lot of the objects start to, like the TV, for instance, would shift between the 60s TV, 50s TV, back to the 70s, or whatever current age TV.
Right. Well, I mean, in the 6th episode, they explained, or they established rather, that like her powers, like the people on the edges of the town were just sort of like frozen in place or like on autopilot, and she was mainly focusing, like extras in a TV show, and she was mainly focused on like animating the people at the center of town, the main cast, if you will. But then at the end of that episode, she expands the borders and makes the hex bigger, and she's like controlling a wider area, and she's got the people on the edges actually doing stuff now, and that's when like everything starts to like really glitch out.
Right. It's kind of like when you have too many if you ever play like an online game, is when you have like too many players in a server, causing the entire server to glitch out and lag and eventually potentially crash.
It's like when you have too many cooks and
too many cooks in the kitchen. Yes. Before I forget, I did mention after watching the first episode, I said to you, you know what? I wouldn't mind watching an entire series just Wanda and Vision living in the 50s with this sort of the premise itself is it's a very fun, charming premise of a robot and a magic and a witch moving into a suburban life, having trying to have a normal life while also juggling their lives as non-humans with living among regular humans.
And it feels like a show that could actually exist because there is a history of like weird sitcoms. It starts with like your Bewitched and your I Dream of Genies, and then you get stuff like I forget what it was called, but there was a sitcom in the '80s where it was all about this guy built a robotic daughter, and like that was the whole premise.
Mm-hmm.
There's Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's a sitcom. It's like what if sitcom but dinosaurs.
Wasn't there one where it's like My Mom the Car? I think that was like a failed pilot.
There's Third Rock from the Sun, which is all about aliens who are like trying to blend into human society. Aliens is a huge thing in sitcoms. You had Alf, you had Mork and Mindy. So like
you even had Hitler for one instance. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh yes.
That's
real my Hitler.
That's a real thing. It was called Heil Honey, I'm Home. It's a real pilot. You can probably already guess why it wasn't picked up.
You're probably wondering, what are the jokes like? Exactly what you imagine.
Oh no, it's the Goldsteins, our annoying Jewish next door neighbors.
This is why I've never watched a single episode of the Michael J. Fox show, because it's like I already know every joke. I know the entire premise. I know. I can picture. I don't need to watch the episodes. I picture them in my head, and they're kind of depressing.
Yeah, the premise
so no
itself,
thanks.
The premise itself was kind of shaky enough to begin with.
It's great that he can laugh about it. I just don't know if I want to.
Speaking of him, what was it? What was the show that he was on? Was it Family Matters?
It was either Family Ties or Growing
Family
Pains.
Ties. Yeah, it was Family Ties, definitely. And then he did Spin City. Let's see, and that's not where he didn't even cover like the whole like that era, like prior to the Cosby Show, when like there was like a strong presence of African Americans on television, like
oh yeah, well,
the Jeffersons.
The Jeffersons, which spun out of All in the Family.
Different Strokes.
Different Strokes. The World Don't Move to the Beat of Just One. That was also a spin-off. I don't remember what of. Oh, Facts of Life, I think. And then our Facts of Life spun out of Different Strokes. I don't remember. It was one way or the other. A lot of these shows are. There's a huge trend in the 70s and 80s of just shows spinning off into other shows. Shows that you never even knew were. Maude is a spin-off of All in the Family. All in the Family has like 6 different spin-offs. And then spin-offs of the spin-offs. It's crazy.
What show did Joni Loves Chachi came from?
I think that one was from Happy Days.
Okay, yeah.
Frasier spun out of
Cheers.
Cheers, yeah.
And everybody knows your name.
We're trying to think of other black sitcoms. Yeah, Good Times, obviously. Dynamite.
Yes.
Sanford and Son.
Yeah. Oh, that's old school. Yeah.
Coming Elizabeth, which actually that show is an adaptation of a British show, but they weren't black. They weren't black in the British version, as you can probably would have guessed. Who else? And then later on, like in the 80s and 90s, there were a ton more. Obviously, like there's one I can never think of the name of it, but there was a sitcom that had the lady who played the mom in Sister, but she wasn't playing the mom in Sister. This was like an older show. I can never think of what that one was called. And then, of course, you had Sister. You had Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You had Martin.
Let's see. Was the actress Jackie Harry?
I think so.
227? Was that the show?
227. Yeah, that's the show.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of that. You know, we just went on a large tangent, but essentially we were mentioning earlier before that there were television shows that focused on. There's always like a certain gimmick to these shows, and sometimes these characters could be like a more fantastical element to the story too, as their one thing to sort of set them apart from the others. So yeah.
So a show that's like she's a witch, he's a robot, like it is believable that show could get made.
Right. And and they managed to translate that premise very well to where it feels like this premise easily could have fit in any genre. I mean, heck, I think you could even make it. I mean, obviously now with WandaVision, you made a show about a woman, about a witch and her robot husband.
Yeah. The other thing that they really nail about all of these eras
Mm-hmm.
And I'm somebody who always loves either a comedic musical number or a like musical montage. They freaking nail the intros, the opening theme for each episode.
Definitely.
Each one is a take on the different variant. My favorite one is the '60s one, the Bewitched one. It's
yes,
the
full
animation.
Yeah.
You know what we should have done? The move would have been we know people who draw. Get somebody to draw us in that like Bewitched style and put it on the thumbnail.
Yes.
Fully endorsed.
Do bop.
And the best one, and we're going to get into some spoiler territory here, but the one that took the internet by storm, and this wasn't even an intro technically, this was an outro, was Agatha All Along.
Yeah, it went full on monsters with that one. That
song was charting on iTunes. It beat whatever Justin Bieber shit was out at the time. Like,
yeah,
that song blew up. It popped off. You go look for it on YouTube right now. You'll find no shortage of remixes and 10-hour versions and covers. It's really great and funny. Catherine Hahn is a delight in this show.
Mm-hmm.
She is like the new Loki, basically.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that they did not kill her off at the end of the show, because that means we're gonna get more in the future. And also, they left her character at like a really dark place, because the shit that Wanda does to her, like you watch the episode and you're like, I know that she's like the villain and this is her comeuppance and everything, but damn.
Essentially just turning her into like a mind slave stuck in that, like completely forgetting, like putting a fake persona of like kind of like a very ironic one where it's like she is a witch. Apparently I didn't know about her existence until Dillion explained it to me. She was a witch from the comics, and she's way older in the comics, not just in appearance but also in actual age. Right, she essentially looks like Aunt May if she had like witch magic powers.
Yeah, picture Aunt May, but like she's a witch and she's been around for thousands of years. In the show it's like hundreds of years, but in the comics she like witnessed the fall of Atlantis and shit. Yeah. So she's been around.
And I bet you're gonna have those Marvel fans who'll be like, I knew about her all along. And eventually they're gonna make some YouTube videos about like, here's Agatha, whatever her last name is, explained.
Agatha Harkness, yeah, those videos already exist. I can confirm. They exist. I've seen them. They're out there.
She's
and here's why it's Mephisto all along.
I had a blast. Like as soon as we were getting near the end game, you were explaining to me how at this point, by the time Agatha was revealed to have been the main villain of this series, you were telling me how everyone was so believing that it was Mephisto all along, and so
especially when Wanda got pregnant, because Mephisto Mephisto is the big part of that story in the comics. I'm not going to go into it in this review because it's complicated, but there's no shortage of YouTube videos that can explain that to you.
Yeah.
Mephisto is involved in that story. And so, even I, before the show started, was like, there's a chance that we could get some Mephisto in here. And it seemed like they were dropping some hints here and there. There's a line in the second episode where Dottie says, the devil is in the details. And then Agnes, who is Agatha Harkness in disguise, leans over to Wanda and says, that's not the only place he is. And then in the Halloween episode, Pietro refers to the children as demon spawn at one point. He's like, I don't remember the exact line, but so it felt like they were dropping some hints that maybe there was Mephisto. But by the time we got to like the end of the 7th episode, and they didn't reveal any Mephisto, I'm like, all right, it's a little bit late in the game now to like whip out Mephisto on top of everything else. Maybe he could still show up later. Maybe he's in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, potentially.
And eventually, it just like as you were explaining this to me, it just became a running gag for us to be like, "Oh, look at that! Look at that thing be in the background. Is it Mephisto? What about that line of dialogue? I'm pretty sure if you spell it backwards, it means Mephisto."
Yeah, that's one reason that a lot of people were pissed off by the finale, because all of their fan theories were wrong. The only one that the internet got right was Agatha Harkness. We called that from like the beginning, from like the moment we saw that bitch in the trailer and like heard that her name was Agnes, people were like, "That's Agatha Harkness," and we were right about that. Everything else that was theorized, nope.
I think that's like the case with me. I'm so glad that I managed to binge through all 9 episodes in a relatively short period of time, as opposed to waiting week to week for you guys. Because I feel like for a lot of these people, as time goes by, as the weeks go by, the level of anticipation and expectations rises with each new episode, and so over the course of like 2 months, that's like a lot of build-up for what is eventually a sort of standard superhero finale. So sure. I'm glad that for me, I did not have that level of anticipation and excitement. I just watched the story unfold as it went along, and I'll be like, whatever happens, I guess. Like, I didn't have that time to process and overanalyze every single detail of episode 1 before going on to episode 2. No, it's just like, episode 1's there, alright, let's see what episode 2 has to offer. So I guess it's like...
See, I enjoyed the week to week, and like the speculation and what basically amounts to like the internet equivalent of water cooler conversation, you know?
True.
Back in the day when you would watch like the new episode of Lost and then go to work the next day and be like, "Did you see Lost?" Like, you know?
Yeah, I totally get that. And as someone who enjoys anime, occasionally enjoys anime, like new anime, like what I'll eventually do with Godzilla Singular Point, just watching episodes week to week as they come out and be like, "Oh wow, did you see what happened on the latest episode of this anime of JoJo Part 5?
Dragon Ball Z,
Dragon Ball Super." I never watched Dragon Ball Super, ironically, week to week, but I did watch Dragon Ball Z week to week. Unfortunately, I don't think I barely had anyone to talk to as the Boo Saga or the Cell Saga was going on.
No. Yeah, we had no choice as kids but to watch Dragon Ball as it was coming out. We didn't have streaming, you damn children. Just walked home from school at the end of the day and popped on Toonami. That's how I saw shit.
Let's see. But yeah, Agatha, she was there from the very beginning as the annoying, quirky, eccentric next-door neighbor. And as the story goes along, they do really good. They did a really good job at sort of diverting attention away from her, so that there is a part of you that feels maybe she's up to something. But it's like they did a really good what do you call it? That moment where Vision thinks that he is wiping her. He is freeing her memory, and she starts panicking.
Yes.
Misdirection. Yes, they did a really good.
It was red herring.
Red herring all along. It wasn't Mephisto.
It was red herring.
So, they did a decent build up to that, and then by the time she was revealed, they explained who she was, where she came from, what her motivations are, and her eventual downfall, and led to a very satisfying resolution. The one thing that was a neat little touch was like they kept hinting at her husband, and you never see her husband throughout the whole show. So it was pretty amusing to finally realize who that husband was this entire time. However, it does lead to I mentioned before, I was praising misdirection beforehand. This misdirection, on the other hand, serves zero purpose in the story other than to piss off fans.
Yeah, should we just talk about Ralph Bohner? So this is the only thing about this show that I don't like. This is the one problem. This is the worm in the apple. Mm-hmm. Is Ralph Bohner. So it's a callback. It's a reference joke. They're referencing there was a character.
It's a meta joke.
There was a supporting character in either Growing Pains or Family Ties. I always get those two shows mixed up. I think it was Growing Pains. Mm-hmm. There was like a best friend character named Boner, and that's it's not just a boner joke. It's also a sitcom reference. Uh-huh. But so they introduced at the end of episode 5 Evan Peters. You all know this. You've lived on the internet for this year. Evan Peters showed up at the door, and everybody thought it's the Marvel, or no, it's the Fox Quicksilver. He's crossed over from the Fox universe, and this is how we're going to get X-Men. And oh my God, what if Magneto shows up in the last episode? And what if Magneto is Mephisto? The internet just.
What if Quicksilver was Mephisto all along?
everybody lost their minds.
Yeah.
And then come to find out he's not the Fox Quicksilver. I mean, he is the actor Evan
The
Peters
actor,
is, but,
yes.
but in this show, he is not playing the Fox Quicksilver. He's just a dude who happens to look like Evan Peters, and his name is Ralph Boner.
And he was simply a mind-controlled servant of Agatha Harkness, who imbued him. Agatha was controlling him via a magical puka shell necklace, yes.
Which also, I assume, because they don't actually state this, but it seems obvious, also allowed him to use Quicksilver's super speed powers.
And imbue him with fake memories.
Yes, although that was probably just her speaking through him.
Right. Yeah, because I don't think they really showed the two of them together, unless I'm mistaken.
No, yeah, you never see Ralph and Agnes in the same place. And my thing is, because at the end of the show, so Agatha now thinks that she is Agnes for real, right?
Yes.
Or on the inside, she knows that she's not, but she's forced to act out this part.
Yeah.
So does she just like go back to Ralph Boner's house and just keep living there? Are they just fucking married now? like she just shows up at the door like, "Hey, Ralph," and he's like, "What the fuck? Who are you?"
You're my husband, silly.
So, yeah, that was the moment. That was the moment that set the internet on fire. When fucking Monica Rambeau turns around that headshot and goes, "Ralph Boner?" It's really funny in hindsight, but I was pissed at the time.
Yeah, it's literally a dick joke.
They pulled an Iron Man 3, and I didn't like it in Iron Man 3, and I still don't like it. Stop doing it, Kevin. Like, just stop it.
You know, he's like talking to Evan Peters, like, "Hey, the internet's gonna get a kick out of this."
Oh God, it was just stunt casting. It was just stunt casting.
Yeah, they made you feel like this was going to be a major crossover between the MCU, the Disney universe, and the Fox universe, but no, it was just a Fox actor playing a character playing the same character.
And I don't know who to blame. Obviously, Kevin Feige didn't write the show, but like...
It was Mephisto, Dylan!
He had to approve it. Yeah, it was Mephisto. Kevin Feige is Mephisto? Question marks?
No, he made a deal with Mephisto to make it happen.
Oh my God, get a title card right now. A picture of Kevin Feige, a big red circle, an arrow. Let's fucking...
Mephisto?
But yeah, so that's Ralph Boner. Boner.
It was funny because like I saw I knew in advance that there was a fake Quicksilver or like a weird other actor playing Quicksilver, but I saw him in the Halloween episode, the Spooktacular Special.
Yeah, you didn't recognize that it was Evan Peters at first.
Yeah. It's like I recognize that. Yeah, because it's funny enough. Like they dress. It's a really cute little Easter egg of like dressing up everybody, the entire family, as their comic book counterparts. And so seeing Quicksilver, Evan Peters dressed up in the comic book Quicksilver outfit, complete with the crazy hair, Super Saiyan looking hair, it's like I could not recognize him at all. Whereas at the end of that episode where he first shows up, he's in his full Fox Quicksilver getup.
The only character who doesn't get their actual comic book costume is Tommy, because they just put him in a mini Quicksilver outfit.
That's true, yeah.
Everybody else has, a low rent approximation of what they look like in the comics.
It was funny that they try to explain Wanda and Vision's costumes. Like with Wanda, it's like, oh, I'm dressed up as a Sarkovian gypsy witch. Sarkovian fortune teller. It's like, okay, I can see that. And then with Vision, he's like, he's a luchador. It's like, I've never seen any luchadors that dress like that.
Yeah, maybe if he had a mask instead of a painted face, so you could buy it a little better.
Yeah, that'd be the thing. It's like, I don't know there. No puedo comprende, ese?
I can run off and fight a mummy.
No comprendo.
No comprendo.
I know, my Spanish is shit. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a Mexican.
Yeah.
I'm a Mexican who is shit at speaking Spanish. I'm too.
Ain't that fucked up? He has roughly the same Spanish speaking abilities as I. A white guy who took 3 years of Spanish in high school. And at my peak, when I was taking like Spanish 3 and was like at my best Spanish speaking ability, I was probably better at it than you are now. I was definitely way better at it than I am now.
At this point, I feel like my Japanese is probably on par with my Spanish.
Probably, yeah.
Let's see. Anything else here?
Well, in addition to Agatha and Ralph Boner, there's also a secondary antagonist in the character of Tyler Hayward, who is the acting director of Sword. And this was another thing, like the internet was like, what is Tyler Hayward's greater significance? How is he connected to Agatha's plan? Is he Mephisto? But much like the reveal with Ralph, he's just a dick.
Just a guy, yeah.
He's just a really douchey dude. I mean, that's all.
He's essentially your generic, like, evil government stooge.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, we need to get our weapons so we can make our super special awesome weapon that only our country can use.
You get the sense that maybe he wasn't always like that because, you know, Monica, like, when she first shows up back at Sword post-Blip, seems to have a lot of respect for him. Like, they've obviously known each other for a long time. But you get the sense that he went through some dark shit during the Blip. Because he even has a line in one of the episodes where he's like, you people that left don't know what it was like, what we had to do just to keep the lights on. It's a great line. And there again, you know, there's Marvel like going into like the Blip and how it fucked everybody up.
It would have been great to have gotten his perspective on things, because otherwise he kind of just devolved into that generic villain, evil government villain template.
You know why he exists in the story, like for real?
For White Vision?
Yeah, to set up White Vision. Which, oh my god, we got White Vision. This is such a deep comic pull. And this is something that's happening now in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Phase 4 don't give a fuck, Andres. They are going deep on their comic book references. They are pulling out all the stuff. There is shit that has showed up in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Again, we're going to talk about that show after it finishes airing. That like blew my fucking mind.
Like I know, I know the most recent episode revealed U.S. Agent, and I'm sure there's going to already a bunch of episodes, a bunch of YouTube videos. Here's everything you don't know about U.S. Agent.
There are. They also revealed some other characters that I will not go into here. Nobody spoil it in the comments, please.
It was Mephisto, damn it!
It was Mephisto. But yeah, White Vision, that's... If you had asked me, like 10 years ago, well, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought that we would have gotten Vision. So, yeah, 5 years ago.
Okay.
5 years ago. If you had asked me 5 years ago, like, hey man, we got Vision now. So, like, you think we'll ever get White Vision? I'd have been like, get the fuck out of here. Get out of town.
Yeah, with this trash. Go back to Westview.
Nobody knows what White Vision is. But they put him in the damn show.
Yeah.
They went ahead and they just fucking did the damn thing. And I love the fact, first of all, the fight scene between White Vision and Fake Vision? Vision? The fight...
Vision.
Vision? Illusion.
Ooh.
It's so smart that his magician name in the second episode is Illusion, because then we find out that he is himself an illusion.
Yes.
It's fucking amazing. And also her name is Glamour, and like a glamour is a type of spell that makes things appear as they aren't really. Like, it's so smart. Anyway. I love the fact it's so smart.
That's a reference to another in joke of ours.
And this show proves you don't have to be dork to be smart. Speaking of smartness, I love the fact that the battle between White Vision and Illusion essentially comes down to a philosophical debate.
Yeah, I really like that because it's
a great scene. It feels very Star Trek. They just stop fighting and start talking for a minute, and they use a classic philosophy like conundrum, the Ship of Theseus. Were you familiar with this before watching the episode?
I don't think so. I've never heard of the Ship of Theseus conundrum.
Yeah, so the idea is that if you take something and then keep replacing parts of it, and eventually there are no original parts left, is that thing still the thing that it was when it started out? You know? This applies to humans. Every 7 years, the cells in your body have all been replaced. Are you still the guy that you were 7 years ago, even though you don't have any of your old cells? It's a classic conundrum, a classic thing in, as they say, identity metaphysics, which you probably shouldn't think about too long because you will drive yourself crazy.
I bet you there's another YouTube video for that.
Yes, what is the ship of Theseus? Red arrows.
And a picture of Vision and White Vision.
Yeah. And then the second part that they mention is that if you take the original pieces from the ship and then reassemble them into a new ship, is that now the ship? They say it in a much less confusing way in the episode, but you get the idea. Yeah. And so it's a classic sort of logic question, philosophical conundrum, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, essentially it's like, I was been programmed to kill the original Vision, but aren't you the original Vision? Huh?
He goes, I request elaboration. That's a great... There are a lot of standout lines from this show.
Not to mention...
Paul Bettany.
Yeah.
Paul Bettany is so great in this show.
Yes, he is. He shines so brightly in this series. I mean, both he and Elizabeth Olsen. He and Elizabeth Olsen, are definitely great. But it's so great just to get so much personality out of Vision that we barely got a glimpse of in the MCU movies.
Yeah, and we got to see him be really funny in this show. We never got that before because he was a robot, and prior to being a robot, he was an AI that, was sometimes snarky because it was programmed by Tony Stark, but it's a different kind of funny.
Right. He's goofy, he's charming, he's silly. He is a very incredibly likable character, very charismatic character to follow.
I'm like, damn it, if the MCU ever gets done with this man, he should go actually be in sitcoms because he's really good at it.
Right. What was the other thing that... I also previously I want to add on to the whole Vision versus Vision thing. That I was glad the idea of the hero fighting an evil doppelganger of themselves is something that's been done to that so many times. I mean, we just got it in the recent MonsterVerse series. I mean, don't act so surprised. You all knew it. If you didn't, you're an idiot. I just finished reading a trilogy of sci-fi novels that ended in this sort of trope as well. And so
the MCU's been doing it ever since the first Iron Man.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's kind of like
really?
the go-to.
All of the villains in Phase 1 are that, really, because, Red Skull their version of Red Skull was created from the same super soldier serum that created Cap.
Ironmonger is essentially evil Iron Man.
Right. Iron Man 2, Whiplash is using similar technology, and then fucking Thor is fighting, Loki, which is just, not exactly an evil counterpart.
But an evil Asgardian.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in this one, this is like a direct clone, pseudo clone of Vision, and yet it didn't end it in just like the hero beating the villain at the end, and the day is saved. Rather, it leaves White Vision in a very interesting position that I'm sure will definitely come back in some movie or series down the line, with him eventually taking over the role as the new Vision, which is great because then that means we get more Paul Bettany.
Right, and really it's a fight. It's a fight not between two different versions of a character, but rather two halves of a character.
Yes.
You have literally the Vision's body that has been reanimated, fighting basically like a representation of the Vision's mind and personality that has been born out of Wanda, because they were both connected to the Mind Stone.
Right. Yeah, that is definitely great to see there.
Paul Bettany also got to deliver the best and also most memed line from this entire series, which is in the 8th episode when we're gonna have to spend some time in this episode just really talking about that 8th episode because it's great. But when he says, "What is grief but love persevering?" And again, this has been memed to death. My favorite one was, "What is beef if not cow persevering?" What is drip if not swag persevering? So many of these.
Yeah. I remember what was the first meme that I saw from the series was the Agatha Harkness wink meme.
Yeah. Did you see the Vishon stuff?
No, I did not. What is that?
Vishon is they took the image of Vision in the black turtleneck,
Yeah.
and they put a fucking chain on it.
Oh,
like he's
shit! I saw that. Yes.
Because black dudes in black turtlenecks, it's like a thing. It was like a chain, and they called it Vishon.
Yeah.
And I kind of want Vishon to be a real character.
Turns out it wasn't white. It was in White Vision. It was Vishon.
It's White Vision versus Black Vision. White Vision versus Vishon.
What was another meme that came out of this? The Wu line where it's like it's an oversimplification, but yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. We haven't talked about Monica Rambeau in a bit. So apparently in the comics,
she's great.
Yes.
She is a revelation. I can't wait to see more of her in Captain Marvel 2, and also maybe the Secret Invasion stuff that they're doing. I don't know if she'll be involved in that at all.
Right. She was definitely like the breakout. This was kind of like her along with Catherine Hahn. Both characters, Agatha and Monica, were definitely big standouts in this show. And yeah, it's really great to have her story be parallels to Wanda's, where she is also mourning the loss of a loved one, in this case her mother. And so she's trying her best to try to reach out to Wanda to help her through the grieving process, and also trying to stand by her side while the sword agents want nothing more than to just take out Wanda by any means necessary. And so she acts as that like sort of in-between person between the military and Wanda herself.
Yeah, so we got to see her superhero origin. We got to see her get her powers in this.
Yes.
And she is one of those comic book characters who's like really underrated because a lot of people don't know about her, but actually she's like one of the most powerful characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, apparently she was the second Captain Marvel even before Carol Danvers in the comics.
Yes, because back then Carol Danvers was Miss Marvel, and if you don't know the comics and you only know the movies, this is probably very confusing.
Which I'm sure, don't worry, there's sure to be 20, 30, 40, 50 YouTube videos about explaining that.
They're already been published. You keep predicting these YouTube videos. They've been out for a month, Andres. Now they're explaining Falcon and Winter Soldier, you see. But yeah.
Has anyone made a video about Mephisto yet?
Yes, so many. Yeah, she's really underrated because she's an incredibly powerful comic book character, and we only really see her scratch the surface of what she can do in this. But her powers are all about like energy. She can like become any like form of energy. She can like absorb energy and manipulate energy and see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Like incredibly powerful in what she can do. It's a lot like DC characters that nobody's heard about, like Spectre, and then you find out that like, oh, he could kill everybody if he wanted to, and you're like, oh, like Swamp Thing is actually one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Like it's one of those situations where it's like people don't know that Monica Rambeau is like she's some tough shit. She could go kick Brie Larson's ass, really.
Honestly,
honestly,
she was in like, as someone who saw the Captain Marvel movie and thought it was just average, I grew to like this Captain Marvel way more than the Brie Larson version.
Abso-friggin-lutely. She's so much more likable. The big problem with the Captain Marvel movie, other than the fact that it feels like a Phase 1 movie that came out in Phase 3, is that you just don't care about Carol Danvers.
Right. There's nothing like, there's no like emotional, there's no real like emotional or like internal or there's no real internal conflict with her, and there's barely any like external conflict as well. It's just like there's nothing there. She's just a very boring, static character from beginning to end.
Yeah, thank God that movie has Sam Jackson being amazing and a great 90s soundtrack, because those are the things that really saved that movie. Monica, much more likable, much more relatable, much cooler, and she got some beef with Carol. We don't know what that's about yet.
Oh yeah.
There's a moment in the show where Jimmy Woo mentions Carol, and Monica gets this look on her face like, "Don't talk to me about that bitch." Like,
why did you say that name?
and we were watching, and you were like, "Ooh, she, there's something going on there," and I was like, "We don't know what it is yet." Maybe Carol is somehow the cause of her mom getting the cancer. Maybe it's a Dr. Manhattan situation.
Was it Mephisto, Dylan?
It was Mephisto all along. And he killed Sparky, too.
Oh, man. Let's see. Is that about it, or is there anything else? Because we've been at this for an hour and a half already.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we've gone on a lot of tangents on this one. We haven't talked at all about the twins, really, and that's a big thing.
Okay. I don't really have a lot to say there, other than they. Yeah.
So, somebody who's not as familiar with like these comic book storylines as I am, this is your introduction to the existence of Billy and Tommy.
Yeah.
Billy and Tommy Maximoff in this, they have different last names in the comics because they died and were reincarnated and blah blah blah. It's very complicated.
I'm
Billy
sure there's
Kaplan.
a YouTube video for that.
There is. It's like Billy Kaplan and then Tommy. I don't remember what his last name is. But yeah, this is your first introduction to Wiccan and Speed, we'll call them, because those are their superhero names. What did you think about that whole storyline? The weird pregnancy and then the weird childhood.
I thought it was a very interesting way of cheating your way through various typical storylines. Like, I remember growing up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that they had Aunt Viv. She was pregnant for a whole season because the actress herself was pregnant. And for a few episodes, you had little baby Nicky, and then like just a few episodes later, he's all of a sudden just a toddler for no reason.
At least he's still alive. We don't know what happened to that other sister from Family Matters. She just disappeared.
So I figured it's like it's like a cheap tactic. Or rather like some like narrative tactic just to sort of like skip time just for this one character in particular, not so much for the entire cast, just for the sake of telling a story the way you want it. So it's like, I'm pretty sure perhaps at some point Wanda, whether it's her action or it's Agatha Harkness, she wanted to just like skip over infancy and go straight into the children as little toddlers and then eventually as like 10-year-olds. But they were okay, for characters that are not really characters. These were like individuals that were like completely made up from within Wanda's mind. They were pretty good. They served their role as like sort of like the typical sitcom family children who care deeply about their parents and seem to let on that they know more about what's going on than what's actually happened, than what the parents want to tell them. And I don't mean that in like the meta way, like, oh, they're aware that they're fictional characters. Rather, I mean like within the in-universe or in sitcom universe, that these kids are sort of more smarter than they look, sort of deal.
Yeah, and I'm really impressed with child actors these days, because ever since Stranger Things, I don't know what has happened, but it's like Hollywood suddenly has all these good child actors, and I'm like, where were they when we were growing up? Because children used to be the most annoying fucking thing in anything, in any movie or show that they were in. It was always like, God, get these kids off the screen. Right. But these days it seems like child actors actually know what the fuck they're doing. I don't know what that is. I don't know if maybe it's because they grew up with the internet and they're just more sophisticated. I don't know.
Or maybe just like the standards have changed, where it's like everyone, maybe like Hollywood has upped its game in terms of like child actors. Then they're like, okay, we need to, like, the world is privy to the reputation that child actors have, so let's actually make an effort to find children with actual talent, or children who have the capacity to learn how to become very good actors.
Right. Also, I was very surprised. I did not think that they were going to do what the comics did in this case. I really didn't think that Disney was going to kill the kids. I thought,
yeah.
well, for one reason, they're very clearly building up to a Young Avengers movie. That's a whole other conversation that I'm not going to have right now. But they're clearly building to that, and these characters are a part of that, and so they're going to have to bring them back from the dead sooner rather than later. And so I was thinking maybe they'll just let them stay around. Also, I wasn't sure because they were actually born out of her vagina, if they were like more real than the other stuff around them. So I thought maybe they would live, but like as soon as in that last episode when she starts to take down the Hex and like Vision goes all glitchy, and then you look over and the kids start going all glitchy too, and I was like, damn, Marvel really out here killing these kids. and they did. They killed those fucking kids.
Yeah. Like they didn't show them disappear. Like they didn't show them on screen dying. They did show
right, but they showed Vision disappear, and that they disappear way before it got to him. So like.
And it's also kind of fucked up. They don't tell him. Oh, I don't know what's more fucked up: telling your kid that you're gonna die soon, you're gonna not exist anymore very soon.
I don't think, even if it was the right thing to do, I don't think I would have had the heart to tell him.
Oh yeah, it's like you go to bed now. Just don't look outside the window.
We're proud of you. Something wrong? You guys seem really sad. No, it's all great.
It's okay.
Get out of here, you stupid animal.
Yeah, you crazy kids.
Yeah, it's really sad. And then the goodbye scene between Wanda and Vision is very good as well.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely, like very heartbreaking because like you've grown to love these two characters, and so you just can't help but like get the feeling like whatever happens to White Vision, you know that whatever's going to happen, it's not going to be their bond is not going to be as tight as it is, or as pure as it is in this case.
Right, because if this version of White Vision is the way he was in the comics, he has Vision's memories, but he does not have the emotions. That's something that he has to regain later on, and so and I think that's the case because he just like fucked off after the other Vision awakened his memories. He was just like, I'm Vision, and then he got the fuck out of there. It's like, you don't want to help out?
It's like, nah, I got my own existential crisis to go through. I have a new purpose in life. I'm gonna find out what that is.
Right, exactly. So I think they are doing the thing where it's like Vision's out there, but he's got a new body and his memories aren't. His memories are a thing, but his emotions are gone. So I think that is the direction that they've gone here. There are two more major things that we need to talk about.
Okay.
And then we can wrap up. I know we've gone longer on this episode, but we did have a lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
One being Wanda's backstory and the fleshing out of her backstory, specifically in reference to her powers, because we talked a little bit about her backstory as far as like the sitcom stuff goes. And then the other thing is her finally getting the name and the thing.
The costume, right?
The costume.
It's kind of funny, yeah. They never referred to her as Scarlet Witch beforehand. That was just only us audience members who would do that, who are privy to who she is in the comics.
I don't think they were allowed to. I think it was one of the weird terms of. I think it was one of the weird terms of like the deal that they had worked out. Because the only reason they were allowed to use Wanda and Quicksilver, even though they were X-Men characters, is that they were also Avengers characters.
Yeah.
I think maybe there was some contractual reason why they didn't use the name Scarlet Witch. I think maybe Fox was holding on to that. Maybe they were going to do something with Scarlet Witch at some point and never did. I don't know.
Like right now I'm trying to look online. No, yeah, I'm looking at the toys based off of the Infinity. Like I'm looking at an Avengers Infinity War action figure that labels her specifically as Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, I mean, we all kept calling her Scarlet Witch because we knew what the fuck was up.
Yeah.
But in the movies, she never had. I mean, they even draw attention to that in an earlier episode when Jimmy Woo is like giving the debriefing, and Hayward goes like, "She doesn't have a code name or like a funny like nickname," and he's like, "Nope." So at the end of the 7th episode, 8th episode, Agatha Harkness calls her the Scarlet Witch for the first time.
Right.
And in this universe, the Scarlet Witch is apparently like a prophesied thing that like was written about in the Darkhold, and that's where the name comes from. Which, you know, is a little cliche or whatever. But I'm fine with it because it's a way to establish a name that was never a thing before in this universe.
You never get to have the characters just make up a name for themselves on the spot, like the Deadpool movie. There's always got to be
Right.
some like convoluted way where like, oh, the public calls them this name, or it's the legend of the Ghost Rider, or whatever ancient story.
Yeah, that's true. The press came up with Iron Man. Captain America is fun because it was like a government propaganda name.
For me, I kind of played around with that trope in my Draco Azul universe, where if you've read my book, Primal Warrior Draco Azul, Full Metal Chronicles, available now on Amazon and Kindle, I kind of made fun of the fact that like Draco Azul happens to be the translated name of what his Mayan name was, and then the public just so happens to call him Draco Azul as well, because the public in Mexico, in modern day Mexico, and the Mayan people of ancient Mexico just so happened to come up with the same name for him, just in 2 different languages.
There are 2 MCU characters who definitely did come up with their own names, though, and that is Spider-Man, the human spider, and Star-Lord.
Right.
Like,
and that's the name that no one wants to remember.
Right. Oh, I guess, and Taserface. She finally, not only did she finally get like her full power set, because previously in the movie she was only really doing like a fraction of what she can do in the comics.
Yeah.
So she finally tapped into her chaos magic. They used the words chaos magic on Trace. She finally tapped into her chaos magic and learned how to do all that shit. Mm-hmm. And she finally got the name, she got the costume. It looks sick too.
Yes, it
does. It's really badass. And she's got like a new attitude where it's like, she's really badass, but at the same time, you're like, damn, Wanda, you scurry. Like, they're out here showing Fox how to do Dark Phoenix right. That's what they're doing.
Oh, boy.
And they also monkeyed around a little bit with her backstory. Now, some people have called it a retcon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would call it a retcon. I think it's more just adding additional information.
Right.
Because they don't contradict anything that was said before. They just provide a little more context. Like, oh, we knew that the Stark bomb never went off, but maybe it didn't go off for a specific reason. And ooh, maybe the Mind Stone did grant you these powers, but perhaps it was merely amplifying something that was already there. It's not everything you knew was wrong and here's the real secret origin. It's, hey, there's more detail here that you never saw before.
Yeah, and I did hear, I heard inklings of that, but my mind was already going to Magneto in terms of like fleshing out her backstory, but unfortunately, no Magneto.
Right, and eventually when they do bring the X-Men into the universe, if they still want to make her and Quicksilver Magneto's kids, they can still do it, because in the comics they didn't always know that they were Magneto's kids.
Yeah,
and that's been retconned now. Currently in the comics, they're not Magneto's kids, but we'll see how long that lasts.
That'd be hilarious, because the whole reason why they made them not Magneto's kids is to have that like sort of brand synergy with the movies, much like how that during that time when they made Spider-Man have organic web shooters, just because the Tobey Maguire version had organic web shooters.
You don't have to make the comics like the movies. I understand that you're doing it for dumb kids, but like dumb...
They're never going to read the comics.
Right, most of the people who read comics these days are adults who grew up as dumb kids. Yeah, so it's not...
the kids these days are reading manga these days. They're never going to read comics, especially not the way that you're running your company, the publishers are running their companies into the ground.
They're playing Fortnite right now.
Yeah.
So it's...
What you need to do is put Scarlet Witch in Quicksilver in Fortnite. It worked before.
You seen that meme where the kid sees footage of Master Chief and he goes, "That's that guy from Fortnite," and I die.
I saw memes of that with Ryu from Street Fighter, because they recently did that collaboration.
I can't. I'm just gonna make myself depressed.
We were into some dumb shit too. Let's not lie.
But at least I knew what my dumb shit was.
Did you? Did you really?
Yes. I also really loved the way that Wanda beat Agatha in the big magic fight.
Yeah,
because like I was saying to you, in a magic fight, you don't want it to be like Dragon Ball Z, where you win because your magic is more magic-ier than the other person's magic.
Yeah.
You want it to be like a clever thing, like, oh, I've outsmarted you with the way I've woven this spell or whatever. And that's like what they did in Doctor Strange with the whole time loop and like Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
Yeah.
And they pull a very similar thing here. They did a classic Chekhov's gun, where they introduce a magical rule in the penultimate episode, and then that Agatha is using against Wanda, and then Wanda turns right back around and uses that same trick in order to defeat Agatha. It's very clever, very well written.
Oh yeah,
written.
It's like classic Hollywood writing 101.
Yeah, because I thought there for a minute they were going to do that dumb thing, because Agatha's whole thing is like she's absorbing the energy from Wanda. She wants to take the Chaos Magic and the Scarlet Witch title from Wanda and use it herself. She says, "Why don't you give it to somebody who knows what to do with it?" Agatha is that bitchy student who works really hard to make good grades, and then they get all fucking butthurt because there's somebody who like doesn't have to study and still makes good grades. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I definitely knew people like that in school, because I was always the person that school came very naturally to me. I never studied until I got to college. You understand?
Yeah.
And like there were always people around me who were working way harder, who were like, "You son of a bitch." So like, I feel that. So yeah, she's trying to take Wanda's magic, and I thought they were going to do that really dumb thing where it's like, "You want it here, take it," and then they're like, "It's too much," and then they explode. You know, the Hulk 2003
right,
ending.
or she somehow reverses the polarity in the neutron flow and is able to reverse the absorption, and she starts absorbing her powers.
Right, basically what Agatha did to all those other bitches in her flashback sequence.
Yeah.
But what they did was so much smarter than that and so much cooler, and I'm so glad that it went down that way.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So yeah, I guess that's everything. I know we went a little longer on this episode, but there really was a lot to discuss.
Yes.
And we went on a few tangents, but
before I do want to say, yeah, I also forgot to mention that I agree with you that the new comic book, more comic book inspired costume is sick. I did love the previous costume. I did really enjoy the previous costumes where it's like a trench coat, leather trench coat, corset, jacket, tight black pants sort of look. I thought it was an interesting way of translating the costume into more like a slightly more fantasized outfit. But yeah, like more like quote unquote realistic, but still slightly more fantasized outfit. But this new version of the more comic book accurate one with the crown and everything looked great with and without the cape. And yeah, I'm just really glad that they finally had a chance to just go all out with that. And I feel like going forward, this could be a sign of things to come where they just decide to go full on more comic book accurate with future designs with future designs in future projects to come.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter how silly the original costume is. A good concept artist can make it look cool. You know what I mean?
If they can make Spider-Man look good in 2002, then yeah, there's no excuse. I'm still waiting for my comic book accurate X-Men outfits.
Like, just reducing the size of the Scarlet Witch crown does wonders for the look. Like it's much skinnier and like slimmer than the one she wears in the comics, and it looks fucking great. Mm-hmm. It's great, and I love the alternate look too when she flies away and she's got like the hood. Yes. I was like, this is a really weird remake of Hocus Pocus right now, because it looks like fucking Sarah Jessica Parker flying around. See, that was all great. Oh, and I can't believe I forgot to mention before, they introduced the Darkhold, which is a major thing. They did it already in the season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that shit ain't canon. And yeah, so now Scarlet Witch has the Darkhold. She's playing around with the Darkhold. Nothing good can come of that, and I'm very excited for what that could potentially mean for Doctor Strange 2. Because we saw that book at the end of the 6th episode, and I was like, is that the motherfucking Darkhold right now, motherfucker? And then they, in episode 8 or 9, 7 and 9, I got the numbers mixed up. Agatha was like, "This is the Darkhold," and I was like, "Yes."
And I was like, "What?"
And I was like, "Don't worry about it. It's cool."
Okay.
So yeah, that was WandaVision. Andres, do you fully endorse WandaVision, even though you were literally the last person to see it?
fuck yes. And so I would say I had a rousing good time all around from beginning to end. It was a nice little nostalgic look back on days of sitcoms past, and I can't wait to see the series of sitcoms future, of action series future with Falcon and Winter Soldier. And yeah, it rekindled my excitement and my love for the MCU, given that it's definitely a very rewarding experience as someone who has followed these characters since Age of Ultron, and so I can't wait to see what sort of adventures they'll have to offer us. And yeah, if things are as good as WandaVision going forward, then I am very excited to see what the MCU has to offer in the future.
All right, man. I'm glad that it made you excited for this universe again. Anything I can do to bring somebody back into the cult is obviously
just when I think
worthwhile.
I'm out, they pull me back in.
Is obviously worth it. So yes, this was Fully Endorsed, episode 29, WandaVision. Andres, what's happening next time? It's something special, if I remember correctly.
Yes, so it's been another 5. It will have been another 5 episodes, so it'll be another guest spot in which we will be inviting Enshoma onto the series to talk about an Italian film by the name of Danger Diabolic. Only thing I know about it is that it's based on an Italian Italian comic, and I believe it was directed or produced by a Mr. Mario Bava, who is someone who is rather famous in the world of Italian filmmaking.
Yes, I've heard of Mario Bava. I didn't know that he made this. All I know about Danger Diabolic is the title. I've heard that title before.
It's definitely a very catchy title, and so I look forward to seeing. I know. Raph, being the aka the Crimson Weirdo, if you follow our series of MST3K versus Gamera Round 2 fan episodes, he's into some pretty strange stuff, so I can't wait to see what sort of weirdness he'll be getting us into next time.
Raph is Mephisto.
Yes, it's the Crimson Weirdo, the Crimson Mephisto all along. Find out next time on the next episode of Fully Endorsed.
He's Raphisto.
Yes, it's Shoma all along. And I was Dirty McCorruption as well.
I laughed so hard at that moment when she was like, and I killed Sparky too. Like it was 3 a.m. and I was just dying.
Alright, so yeah, be sure to tune in next time, everybody. So you can follow me, of course, here on Kaiju Noir. Follow me on Instagram at Kaiju Noir. Check out my book, my comic book, Primal Warrior Draco Azul, and the novel-length anthology, Primal Warrior Draco Azul, Full Metal Chronicles. And you can follow Dillion on this channel as well as his YouTube channel. You can check out his old stuff at Super DM64, and be sure to look forward to our review for Godzilla versus Kong, which will easily date this episode. I'm sure we've said a lot of things that date this episode of Fully Endorsed.
That Godzilla versus Kong episode video might even come out before this one, just because we've got another episode of Fully Endorsed that's in the can, and we're gonna want to get that Kong Godzilla GVK review out while it's still fresh. You know what I mean?
Right. All right. So until next time, everybody. I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir,
and I've been Super DM64.
And until next time, everybody, take care.